Good evening, and welcome to Adam's Scary Stories. Tonight, we journey into the heart of the great Alaskan wilderness, a land of breathtaking beauty and profound isolation. Our first account comes from a place no human has ever seen with their own eyes, a realm of eternal night and crushing pressure. It is pieced together from the declassified logs of the research vessel Oceanus, the frantic audio recordings from its control room, and the final, chilling video feed from a submersible that was never recovered. The official report cites a catastrophic equipment failure. The truth, buried in the suppressed data, is far more terrifying. In the summer of 2023, a team of marine biologists from the Scripps Institution of Oceanography was charting the unexplored depths of the Aleutian Trench, one of the deepest and most geologically active chasms on the planet. Their mission, aboard the state-of-the-art R/V Oceanus, was to map the trench floor and study the unique life forms, the extremophiles that thrived in this hostile environment. The lead scientist was Dr. Eris Thorne, a man who had dedicated his life to the belief that the deep ocean was the last true frontier of discovery on Earth. He was about to be proven right in the most horrifying way imaginable. For weeks, the mission was routine. The team deployed their prized possession, a remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, named Hades. It was a marvel of engineering, a $10 million submersible capable of withstanding pressures of over 16,000 pounds per square inch and operating at depths of over 6 miles. It was equipped with an array of high-definition cameras, powerful LED lighting arrays, sonar, and manipulator arms for collecting samples. On the 14th of July, 2023, the Oceanus was positioned over a previously unmapped section of the trench. The sonar readings were anomalous. Instead of a sloping, sediment-covered seabed, the bathymetry showed a perfectly flat, unnaturally smooth plain, bordered by what appeared to be a sheer cliff face dropping into a darkness so deep their sonar couldn't find the bottom. They designated the area the Abyssal Plain. Dr. Thorne, sitting in the darkened control room, his face illuminated by a dozen monitors, gave the order, "Let's send Hades down for a look. I want to know what could create a feature like that." The descent took over 4 hours. The control room was quiet, the only sounds the gentle hum of electronics and the calm, professional voice of the ROV pilot, a young technician named Jenna Diaz. On the main screen, the depth gauge ticked relentlessly downward. 5,000 feet. 10,000 feet. The water outside the camera lens was a perfect inky black, a void populated only by the occasional ghostly drift of marine snow. At 21,000 feet, just over 4 miles deep, the sonar pinged something. "Dr. Thorne?" Diaz said, her voice steady. "Getting a hard return. Something is on the seafloor. It's large, and it's geometric." Geometric? Thorne leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the sonar display. It showed a shape that had no place in the natural world, a perfect circle, hundreds of feet in diameter. "Take us in closer, Jenna. And bring up the main lights." The powerful LED arrays on the Hades blazed to life, cutting a brilliant cone of white through the eternal darkness. The seafloor resolved into view. It was just as the sonar had predicted, a vast, flat expanse of fine, dark silt. But in the center of their lights, resting on the seabed, was the source of the sonar reflection. A collective gasp went through the control room. It was a structure. It was an immense, circular building, easily the size of a football stadium, with a low, domed roof. The material it was made from was a dark, matte metal that seemed to absorb the ROV's light, giving it no reflection. It was clearly artificial, with visible panel lines, seams, and what looked like reinforced joints. There were no windows, no doors, no markings of any kind. It was utterly featureless, ancient, and silent. What is that?" a junior biologist whispered. Thorne was speechless. He checked their position. They were hundreds of miles from the nearest landmass, in one of the most remote places on Earth, No government, no corporation had the technology to build something of this scale at this depth. It was impossible. Is it a wreck? A lost sub? Diaz asked, her voice tight. No, Thorne breathed. It's too big. And it's not a wreck. It's planted. It looks like it was built here. He grabbed a microphone. Logged the discovery. Time is 22:47 Zulu. We have found an unidentified artificial structure at a depth of 21,340 feet. For the next hour, they piloted the Hades around the perimeter of the object. Its scale was staggering. It was a silent, monolithic testament to an unknown architect. The team's excitement was electric, mixed with a growing sense of profound unease. Who could have built this? And when? The fine layer of silt covering it suggested it had been there for an immense amount of time, thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of years. Then, they found the observatory. On the far side of the main dome, connected by a thick, windowless corridor, was a smaller, secondary structure. This one was different. It was a sphere, about 50 feet in diameter, and unlike the main dome, it was constructed almost entirely of a smooth, black, glass-like material. It resembled a massive, dark eye staring blindly into the abyss. It's an observation deck, Thorne realized aloud. A viewport. There's something else, Diaz said, her fingers flying across her control panel. I'm picking up a faint energy reading. Extremely low frequency. It's coming from inside the structure. A cold dread began to snake its way through the control room. An energy signature meant it wasn't dead. It was dormant. Take us right up to the viewport, Jenna, Thorne commanded, his scientific curiosity overriding his fear. I want to see what's inside. Diaz expertly maneuvered the ROV until its main camera was just inches from the black, curved surface. She angled the lights, trying to penetrate the darkness within. For a moment, there was nothing but their own reflection in the polished surface. And then, a light turned on inside. It wasn't a sudden flash, but a slow, soft bloom of pale blue light, illuminating a vast, cavernous space within the sphere. The control room fell dead silent. The team stared, mesmerized and horrified, at the image on the screen. The interior was not an observatory, it was a tomb. Suspended in the center of the sphere, held in place by what looked like beams of solidified shadow, was a creature. It was immense, easily filling half the visible space. Its form was a blasphemy against biology, a chaotic tangle of limbs, tentacles, and multifaceted eyes that seemed to drink in the light. Its skin was the color of a deep space nebula, swirling with dark purples and blues. It was utterly alien, and it was perfectly still. But as they watched, one of its countless, unblinking eyes, a slit of burning gold the size of a man, slowly swiveled to stare directly at the ROV's camera. It knew they were there. A strangled cry came from the back of the room. "My God," Thorne whispered, unable to look away. It's preserved. A specimen." "I don't think it's a specimen, sir," Diaz said, her voice trembling. The energy reading just spiked. As she spoke, a second light bloomed within the chamber, then a third and a fourth. All around the colossal creature, smaller lights began to activate, revealing that it was not alone. Dozens of other beings, smaller but no less alien, were arranged around it in a perfect, concentric circle. They looked like priests attending their dead god, their forms vaguely humanoid but elongated, with limbs too long and joints that bent at impossible angles. And as one, they all turned their heads to look at the Hades. "Back us off," Thorne ordered, his voice cracking. "Now, Jenna, get us away from there." Diaz pulled back on her controls, and the ROV began to retreat. But it was too late. From the main dome, the larger structure, a deep, resonant hum began to emanate, so powerful that it vibrated through the water and was picked up by the ROV's audio sensors. It sounded like a colossal bell being struck, a single, pure note that seemed to warp the space around it. "What is that?" someone shouted. "The structure is activating," another replied. "EMF readings are off the charts." On the main screen, a section of the dome's roof began to retract, revealing a soft, pulsating green light from within. The hum grew louder, more intense. "Sir, I'm losing control," Diaz cried out. "Something is overriding my commands. It's pulling us in." The ROV, caught in an invisible tractor beam, stopped its retreat and began to move back toward the structure, toward the glowing aperture in the dome. Diaz fought with her controls, her knuckles white, but the submersible refused to respond. "It's a communication attempt," Thorne said, a wild, desperate hope in his eyes. "It's trying to talk to us." "It's not talking, Eris, it's taking," yelled another scientist. "Shut it down, cut the tether." But before they could, the observatory sphere went black again. A moment of silence. Then, the exterior of the sphere began to glow. Thin, intricate lines of blue light raced across its surface, forming complex geometric patterns, like a circuit board coming to life. They converged on the very front of the viewport, directly facing the helpless ROV. "It's a focused energy transmission," the comms officer stammered. It's a signal." The signal came not as sound, but as a direct, blinding flash of light. The main camera on the Hades whited out, and every speaker in the control room erupted with a deafening blast of static. The monitors flickered and died, one by one, as the signal overloaded their systems. Alarms blared across the bridge of the Oceanus. "We've lost the feed," Diaz screamed. "I've lost everything. The link is dead." For 10 agonizing seconds, the control room was chaos. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the static stopped. One by one, the monitors flickered back to life. The main screen showed a stable image. The control room fell silent again, a silence born of pure, undiluted terror. The camera feed was no longer from the Hades. They were looking out from the observatory. The image was from inside the sphere, looking through the great black viewport. In the distance, they could see the tiny, helpless form of the Hades, its lights flickering pathetically. The image was tinged with a faint blue, and the audio was filled with a low, chittering whisper that felt like it was crawling directly into their minds. They had not just lost the ROV, the intelligence in the structure had hijacked their signal. It had established a connection. Thorne stared at the screen, his face pale, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible. It didn't just block our signal," he rasped. "It swapped it. It's showing us what it sees." As they watched, paralyzed, a long, slender appendage, blacker than the surrounding water, drifted into the frame from below. It moved with a slow, deliberate grace, ending in a cluster of fine, needle-like fingers. It reached out toward the distant ROV. "They're going to take it," a biologist whimpered. The appendage didn't take it. It paused, and the chittering whispers on the audio channel grew more intense, more structured. It felt like a debate, a discussion. Then, the appendage slowly retracted. On the screen, the view began to change. It was no longer looking at the Hades. The viewpoint was turning, panning across the interior of the sphere. It showed them the colossal, dead creature in the center, its golden eye still open and vacant. It showed them the ranks of the tall, slender beings, standing motionless at their stations. It was showing them everything. It was giving them a tour. "Why?" Diaz whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Why is it showing us this?" "Because it's not a tomb," Thorne said, his voice hollow with a terrible final understanding. "It's a ship, and that's the pilot. It's not dead, it's sleeping. And I think we just woke it up." The viewpoint on the screen stopped, now looking directly at one of the tall, slender beings. The creature raised one of its long, three-jointed arms and pointed a finger, not at the camera, but seemingly through it, at the men and women on the Oceanus miles above. The chittering on the audio channel stopped. It was replaced by a single, perfectly clear voice. It spoke in English, but the cadence was wrong, stitched together from 1,000 different dialects, as if learned from a century of stray radio waves. "You are loud," the voice said, a sound of dry leaves and cracking ice. "You have woken the dreamer. Now you will help us." The feed from the abyss cut out, replaced by a single, geometric symbol glowing on the screen. At the same moment, every alarm on the R divided by V Oceanus began to scream. The ship's engines died. The navigation systems went dark. The lights flickered and went out, plunging the entire vessel into darkness. They were dead in the water, adrift directly above the sunken observatory. The last entry in the ship's log, scrawled by a terrified crewman in the emergency logbook, reads, "Something is coming up. It's not a submersible, it's the light. The green light is coming up from the deep." The R divided by V, Oceanus, and its crew of 47 were never seen again. A Navy search mission found only a small debris field and a single, unidentifiable metal fragment that emitted low-level radiation and resisted all attempts to cut or analyze it. The official story was that the ship was lost to a rogue wave in a sudden storm. But among the tight-knit community of deep-sea explorers, whispers persist. They speak of a silent zone in the Aleutian Trench, a place where sonar signals vanish and communications die. They say that sometimes, late at night, encrypted military satellites pick up a faint, repeating signal from the depths. It is not a distress call, it is a broadcast. A single, complex symbol, being beamed methodically, patiently, toward the stars. A help-wanted sign from an intelligence that has finally woken up and is now looking for a new crew. The winter of 2022, Dr. Alani Adebayo was on the verge of a breakthrough. A paleoclimatologist with a reputation for pursuing radical theories, she had secured funding for a solo expedition to the North Slope of Alaska. Her mission was to drill and analyze ice cores from a region of permafrost believed to be among the oldest on Earth, dating back over 1 million years. She believed these ancient ice layers were more than just a climate record. She theorized they were a geological hard drive, capable of storing faint electromagnetic impressions from the past. It was a theory her colleagues dismissed as scientific fantasy. Her base of operations was a small, state-of-the-art, modular research station, designated Outpost Boreas. It was a self-contained habitat dropped by helicopter into the middle of a vast, featureless plain 200 miles north of the Arctic Circle. For 3 months, Alani would be the only living human being in 1,000 square miles. This isolation didn't bother her. She craved it. It was the only way to ensure the silence needed for her delicate work. Her audio logs begin with the clipped, professional tone of a scientist confident in her mission. Her clear, energetic voice recorded, "Log entry, day 3. Core extraction is proceeding ahead of schedule. We've reached a depth of 400 meters, dating back approximately 300,000 years. The ice is pristine, no contamination. The station's systems are performing flawlessly. The silence out here island, absolute, it's perfect." Alani's work was meticulous. In the station's small lab, surrounded by humming machinery, she would analyze the cylindrical ice cores she extracted. While her colleagues focused on trapped air bubbles and sediment layers, Alani was listening. She had designed a specialized sensor, a cryogenic resonance scanner, that she believed could detect and amplify any residual electromagnetic fields trapped within the ice's crystalline structure. For the first 2 weeks, the results were unremarkable. The scanner picked up nothing but faint background radiation from the Earth's magnetic field. The logs from this period are filled with technical data and notes of frustration. But on day 17, everything changed. A new excitement entered her voice as she recorded her log. Log entry. Day 17. I have a signal. It's faint, almost imperceptible, but it's there. It's coming from the 800-meter core, dated to the late Pleistocene. It's not random noise, it's structured. A repeating, rhythmic pulse. It's beautiful. They said it was impossible, but I've found it. The ice remembers. Alani spent the next 48 hours working without sleep, fueled by adrenaline and coffee. She refined her equipment, filtering out the background noise and amplifying the signal. The pulse became clearer, resolving into a complex waveform. It was not a natural phenomenon. It was artificial, a broadcast, frozen in time for 500,000 years. She felt she was on the cusp of a discovery that would rewrite human history. She had no idea she was actually uncovering its end. The first hint of the true nature of the signal came when she tried to decode it. It wasn't a language or a mathematical sequence. It was a voice, distorted, warped by millennia of geological pressure, but unmistakably human. Her hushed, awestruck voice filled the log. Log entry. Day 20. I've isolated the vocal component. It's a woman's voice. The words are fragmented. Systems failing. Air is thin. God, it's so cold. It's a distress call. I'm listening to a distress call from the Ice Age. Is it a trick of the ice? A phantom echo? Or was someone here, an ancient civilization? I need to get a clearer signal. Obsessed, Alani pushed her equipment to its limits. She rerouted power from the station's non-essential systems, including the secondary heating coils, to boost her scanner's amplification. The lab grew colder, but she barely noticed. She worked for days, painstakingly reconstructing the audio, filtering it through dozens of algorithms. Finally, she managed to isolate a clean, coherent sentence from the ancient ice. She played it back, her heart pounding. The voice that came from the speakers was thin, weak, and filled with a chilling, breathless panic. It said, "Mayday, Mayday. This is Dr. Alani Adebayo at Outpost Boreas. Can anyone hear me? The primary generator is gone. Life support is failing. I can't feel my hands." Alani stumbled back from the console, a cry catching in her throat. It was her own voice. The name, the station, the voice itself, it was all hers. She checked the date of the ice core again. 550,000 years old. It was impossible. A coincidence. A cruel cosmic prank played by the physics of ice and sound. She tried to rationalize it, her scientific mind rebelling against the terrifying implication. Her strained, rapid voice entered the log. Log entry, day 24. It has to be an acoustic anomaly. My own voice, somehow projected and recorded. A quantum echo, perhaps? The stress of isolation. Maybe I'm hallucinating. I need to run diagnostics. On the equipment, on myself. It's not real. It can't be. But the echo from the ice refused to be dismissed. As she continued to listen, it grew stronger, clearer. It was no longer just a few fragmented sentences. It was a full audio log, a desperate, terrifying monologue from a future that was, for Alani, yet to come. The voice from the ice, her own voice, spoke of events with chilling specificity. The panicked voice from the recording said, "The primary generator failed at 3:17, just like the signal said it would. A catastrophic turbine failure. The backup is running, but it's not enough to power life support and the heating systems. The temperature in the habitat is already dropping." Alani's blood ran cold. She scrambled to the engineering console and checked the primary generator's diagnostic logs. They were perfect. The turbine was functioning at 100% efficiency. It was a lie, a ghost story from the ice. But the echo was persistent. It began to describe her own actions, her present-day disbelief, as if it were a memory. The voice from the ice spoke with desperate regret. "I should have listened. The warning was right there, frozen in time. I heard it. I heard myself warning me, and I called it a hallucination. I was so arrogant, so focused on the discovery that I didn't see the message." A new, creeping dread began to take hold of Alani. Was it a warning, a prophecy written in ice, or was it a self-fulfilling one? Was the signal itself the catalyst for the disaster it described? She felt trapped in a paradox, a temporal loop she couldn't comprehend. In a desperate attempt to break the cycle, she decided to do the one thing the voice from the ice seemed to regret not doing. She listened. She spent the next 3 days transcribing every word from the ancient signal, creating a terrifying transcript of her own future. The echo spoke of the station's systems failing one by one in a precise and unalterable sequence. It described her frantic, useless attempts to repair them, and it spoke of something else, something outside. The terrified, whispering voice from the recording said, "It's not just the cold, there's something out there. I see it when the wind dies down. A shape at the edge of the light from my window. It doesn't move like an animal. It's tall, and it waits. It knows the cold is my enemy. It's patient. I think it was drawn by the signal. The echo. It's been waiting a long, long time." This was the first mention of an external threat. Alani scanned the horizon from the station's small viewport. There was nothing, just an endless, sterile expanse of white. She told herself the thing outside was a true hallucination, a product of the dying mind of her future self. The real threat was the cold, the mechanical failure. If she could prevent that, she could break the loop. The echo's transcript gave her a timeline. The primary generator was predicted to fail on day 31 at 3:17 a.m. Armed with this knowledge, Alani spent the next week preparing. She triple-checked every component of the generator. She reinforced the backup systems. She stockpiled emergency thermal blankets and rations in the lab, the warmest part of the station. She was a scientist fighting against a ghost, using logic and engineering to defy a prophecy. Day 31 arrived. Alani sat in the engineering bay all night, watching the generator's diagnostics, a fire extinguisher in one hand and a toolkit in the other. The minutes ticked by. 3:15, 3:16. The generator hummed along perfectly. A wave of relief washed over her. She had done it. She had broken the chain. At 3:17 a.m., the lights in the station flickered and died. A sudden, violent shudder ran through the entire habitat. A high-pitched mechanical scream echoed from the generator bay, followed by the sickening crunch of shearing metal. The primary generator, which had been running perfectly a second before, had catastrophically failed. The emergency lights kicked on, casting the station in a dim, red glow. The main console flashed a single stark message: turbine failure. Her voice, breathless with shock and terror, filled the log. Log entry. Day 31. It happened. It happened exactly as the echo said. I was watching it. There was no warning, no pressure drop, no temperature spike. It just broke. It's not a prophecy. It's a script. And I'm just playing my part. Panic gave way to a chilling resignation. The events of the next few days unfolded exactly as the echo had foretold. The backup generator couldn't handle the load. The temperature inside the station began to plummet. The communication systems failed one by one, cutting her off from the outside world. She was now living the distress call she had unearthed. And then she saw it. Just as the echo had described, she caught a glimpse of something at the edge of the station's fading exterior lights. It was a tall, gaunt figure, impossibly thin, standing motionless against the driving snow. It wasn't a bear or any animal she could identify. It looked vaguely human, but its proportions were wrong, its limbs too long and slender. It made no move toward the station. It simply stood there, watching, waiting. Her scientific mind, her last bastion of sanity, tried to find an explanation, a trick of the light, a snowdrift, a hallucination brought on by hypothermia and stress. But in her heart, she knew it was real. It was the thing the echo had warned her about, the patient watcher. Her final audio logs are a harrowing descent into despair. She was no longer a scientist, but a prisoner of fate, chronicling the final hours of a life that had been written for her 500,000 years ago. Her weak voice, her breathing shallow, recorded, log entry, I don't know the day. The ice is forming on the inside of the windows now. It's so cold. I keep listening. To the echo. To myself. It's the only other voice left. In the final recording, I start talking about the signal. About how it's not a warning. It's a lure, it's a trap, laid across time. It calls people here, one by one. It creates the disaster it predicts. It feeds the cold. In her final hours, huddled in the freezing lab, Alani finally understood. The echo wasn't a recording of a future event, it was the cause of it. The signal was a predatory mechanism. It broadcast a perfectly tailored psychological trap, the sound of one's own future death to lure its victim in. It created a paradox that ensured its own fulfillment, a closed loop of terror. The energy from the failing station, the life force of its dying occupant, the sheer psychic terror, all of it was being absorbed, fed back into the ice, strengthening the signal for its next victim, centuries or millennia from now. And the figure outside? It wasn't a hunter. It was a shepherd, a tender of the trap, there to ensure the harvest was collected. Her last recorded words are barely a whisper, a final, desperate attempt to break the cycle for whoever might come next. Don't listen to the ice. It's a lie. A beautiful, terrible lie. It doesn't remember. It hungers. The audio log ends there. When a rescue team finally reached Outpost Boreas 3 months later, they found the station frozen solid, a tomb of ice and steel. Dr. Alani Adebayo was gone. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints leading away from the station. She had simply vanished. All they found was her research hard drive, containing the audio logs and the recording of the permafrost echo. Investigators concluded she died of exposure after wandering out into a blizzard. But they could not explain one final, disturbing detail. When they analyzed the station's drill site, they found that the 800-meter ice core, the source of the signal, was gone. The borehole was empty, and deep inside it, their cameras caught a glimpse of something before the lens frosted over. A faint, rhythmic pulse of blue light, deep in the ancient ice, waiting. The fall of 2019. Dr. Evan Sinclair and his senior colleague, Dr. Marcus Thorne, arrived in Utqiagvik full of academic ambition. They were there to document the folklore and psychological coping mechanisms of the local Inupiat community during the long, sunless winter. Evan was the junior partner, eager and methodical, his journal filled with neat, precise entries. Marcus was the seasoned veteran, charismatic and a bit reckless, more interested in immersing himself in the culture than just observing it. The first few weeks were a whirlwind of interviews and data collection. Evan meticulously documented everything, but he found himself increasingly drawn to a recurring theme in the local legends, a story the elders spoke of only in hushed, reluctant tones. They called it Tornrak. In his journal, Evan wrote, "The 28th of October, the sun sets today for the last time for 66 days. There's a palpable tension in the town that goes beyond the practical preparations for winter. I've managed to get old Samuel, one of the elders, to speak about Tornrak. He describes it not as a monster, but as a hunger spirit, an ancient consciousness that rides the cold wind. He says that during the deepest part of the polar night, it seeks a host, someone whose spirit has been weakened by the darkness and fills them with an insatiable, unnatural hunger." Marcus finds it fascinating. I find it deeply unsettling. Marcus, ever the daring anthropologist, was captivated by the legend. He saw it as a perfect example of a cultural myth designed to explain the very real dangers of seasonal depression and resource scarcity. He began spending more and more time with the elders, participating in their ceremonies, and even fasting with them, claiming he wanted to understand the spiritual vacancy that might make one vulnerable to a spirit like Tornrak. Evan warned him against taking it too far, but Marcus just laughed. A hint of concern crept into Evan's journal. The 15th of November. Marcus is becoming theatrical. He's been fasting for 3 days now. He claims it's for methodological empathy. Last night, he sat outside during a blizzard for an hour, meditating. When he came back in, his eyes had a strange, feverish glint. He said he felt like the wind was speaking to him. I told him he was just dangerously cold. He smiled and said, "Or maybe I'm finally learning to listen." The change in Marcus was subtle at first. It began with the food. After his fast, he developed a voracious appetite. He would consume huge quantities of caribou and whale meat, often barely cooked. He started hoarding food in their small cabin, hiding packages of dried fish and muktuk under his bunk, in his closets. When Evan confronted him, Marcus became defensive, almost paranoid. Evan's anxiety grew, and he noted in his journal, the 5th of December, the hoarding has gotten worse. I found a whole frozen salmon under his pillow this morning. He claims he's just stockpiling for the deep winter, but his eyes, they're different. The pupils seem permanently dilated, even in the bright cabin light, and he started talking in his sleep. Not in English. It's a guttural, clicking language. I recorded it and played it for Samuel. The old man turned pale and refused to translate. He just crossed himself and whispered one word, Tornrak. Evan's academic detachment was crumbling, replaced by a primal fear. The man he had known for years was disappearing, replaced by a stranger who moved with a new, predatory stillness. Marcus stopped showering. A gamey, animal smell began to cling to him, a scent that soap and water couldn't wash away. He would spend hours just staring out the window into the swirling blackness of the polar night, his head cocked as if listening to a conversation no one else could hear. The true horror began one night when Evan woke to a strange sound from the cabin's small kitchen. It was a wet, rhythmic crunching. He got up, his heart pounding, and crept to the doorway. The sight that met him would be burned into his memory forever. Marcus was crouched on the floor, naked, his back to Evan. In the dim light, Evan could see that his friend's frame had changed. His shoulders seemed broader, his spine more pronounced. He was hunched over a large piece of frozen caribou meat, tearing at it with his teeth, the sound of bone crunching echoing in the small space. He wasn't just eating, he was gorging, with a desperate, inhuman ferocity. Evan made a small, involuntary sound. Marcus froze. Slowly, he turned his head. His face was smeared with blood and grease, but it was his eyes that made Evan's soul turn to ice. They were no longer human. They were the flat, black, hungry eyes of a wolf, and they held no recognition, only a cold, calculating appraisal. Evan's trembling hand could barely write. The 18th of December. It's not Marcus anymore. I don't know what it is, but it's wearing his body like a suit. I saw him eating raw meat last night. When he looked at me, there was nothing there. Just hunger. The hunger Samuel spoke of. It looked at me the way a wolf looks at a rabbit. I've barricaded my bedroom door. I don't think it will hold for long. The thing in the other room is getting stronger. I can hear it pacing, gnawing on the furniture. It's testing the walls. Trapped in the cabin by a raging blizzard, and the thing that was once his friend, Evan, descended into a living nightmare. The creature outside his door became more cunning. It would sometimes speak in Marcus's voice, pleading with Evan to open the door, telling him he was sick and needed help. It would cry and beg, perfectly mimicking the man it had consumed. But underneath the performance, Evan could hear a low, guttural growl and the constant, restless scratching at the door. The creature also began to display a terrifying, non-human intelligence. The cabin's power flickered and died one night. When Evan, trembling, went to check the fuse box, he found the wires had been deliberately chewed through. The thing was trying to disable the cabin, to plunge them into the freezing darkness where it held the advantage. Evan's journal entries became a frantic chronicle of survival. He rationed the small amount of food he had in his room. He melted snow for water on a small emergency candle. His world shrank to the four walls of his bedroom, while a monster of ancient folklore prowled just feet away. His weak, hoarse whisper filled the pages. The 24th of December, Christmas Eve. The scratching has stopped. It's been silent for hours. I think it's trying a new tactic. It's trying to make me think it's gone. But I can feel it. The hunger. It's pressing against the door, not with its body, but with its will. It's in my head. I'm so hungry. I haven't eaten in 2 days. I saw my own reflection in the window. My eyes. The psychological warfare was relentless. The creature began to whisper to him through the door, not in Marcus's voice, but in the ancient, clicking tongue he had heard in his sleep. The words were meaningless to Evan, but the intent was clear. The whispers spoke of the exquisite taste of warm flesh, the satisfaction of cracking bone, the glorious, final release of giving in to the all-consuming hunger. The spirit of Tornrak was no longer content with one host, it wanted another. Evan's final journal entry is barely legible, the handwriting a wild, spidery scrawl, written with a strange, calm detachment. The 2nd of January. The blizzard has broken. The whispering was right. The hunger is a gift. It clarifies things. All the fear, the morality, the self, it's just noise. Beneath it all, there is only one truth. Eat or be eaten. Marcus was weak. He fought it. I won't make the same mistake. I'm going to open the door now. We are so hungry. When the blizzard finally cleared and concerned townsfolk broke down the door to the cabin, they found a scene of unimaginable carnage. The cabin was destroyed, the furniture splintered and gnawed. The barricade before Evan's room was torn to pieces. Of Marcus Thorne, all that was found were a few splintered bones and a shredded parka. Dr. Evan Sinclair was gone, but his footprints led from the cabin out into the vast, dark tundra. Alongside his were a second set of tracks, larger, deeper, and not entirely human. The two sets of prints walked side by side for several miles before merging, impossibly, into a single track. The journal was found on the kitchen table, left open to the final page, as if for an audience. The official report from Anchorage cited a case of psychosis and cannibalism induced by extreme isolation and stress. But the Inupiat elders knew the truth. Tornrak had claimed a host, and when its hunger was not satisfied, it had simply moved on, taking its new body with it into the polar night. They say that sometimes, on the coldest, darkest nights in Utqiagvik, when the wind howls just right, you can hear a strange, clicking whisper on the wind. And hunters who venture too far out onto the ice sometimes report finding strange tracks in the snow, the tracks of a single being that walks with the gait of two, forever searching, forever hungry. Story 4. On the afternoon of the 9th of November, 2021, Frank Miller was in his element. Seated in the dimly lit control room, he was a master of a complex, three-dimensional world, guiding aircraft through a sky that was, on this day, particularly treacherous. A massive winter storm was descending on the Alaska Range, and Frank was methodically rerouting flights, his voice a calm, steady anchor in the chaos of the storm. His attention was focused on a small cargo plane, a Cessna 208 Caravan with the call sign Tundra 49er. It was piloted by a man named Gary Jensen, a seasoned bush pilot with over 20,000 hours of flight time in Alaska. Gary was a legend, a pilot who could land a plane on a dime in a crosswind. If anyone could handle this storm, it was him. He was on a routine run, carrying mail and medical supplies to the remote community of Talkeetna. Anchorage Center. This is Tundra 49er. Gary's voice crackled through the speaker, steady despite the static. Encountering heavy icing at 1-2000. Requesting descent to 9-1000 to try and clear it. Tundra 49er, Anchorage Center. Roger that, Frank replied, his eyes scanning the radar. Descend and maintain 9-1000. Be advised, you have heavy precipitation 20 miles ahead, directly on your course. Denali is not in a good mood today. Tell me something I don't know, Frank, Gary chuckled. The sound was reassuring. This was routine. This was just another day in the Alaskan sky. For the next 20 minutes, the flight continued without incident. Gary leveled off at 9-1000 feet, reporting that the icing was lessening. Frank watched the small green blip of Tundra 49er crawl across his screen, a tiny spark of life in a vast, angry wilderness of weather. Then, a new blip appeared on his radar. It materialized out of nowhere, less than a mile from Gary's plane, at the same altitude and on the same heading. It was a primary target, only no transponder, no flight plan, no identification. A ghost. In the crowded airspace of the lower 48, it would be cause for immediate alarm. But in Alaska, it was not unheard of. A small-time pilot with old equipment, flying VFR, and getting caught in the storm. Still, it was sloppy, and it was dangerously close to his aircraft. Tundra 49er? Frank said, his voice tightening slightly. Be advised, you have unidentified traffic at your 10 o'clock, less than 1 mile. Do you have a visual? There was a pause. The static on the line seemed to deepen. When Gary's voice came back, the easygoing humor was gone. Affirmative, Anchorage. I have a visual, he said slowly. Frank, what the hell am I looking at? Can you identify the aircraft type, Tundra 49er? Another pause. Frank could hear the wind howling outside Gary's cockpit. It's old, Frank. Real old. Looks like a Stinson, maybe a Model A, tri-motor. Haven't seen one of those in the air since I was a kid. It's flying in perfect formation with me. Rock steady. Frank frowned, his fingers dancing across his keyboard, pulling up aircraft registries. The Stinson Model A was an antique, a relic from the 1932. There were only a handful left in the world, all of them in museums. None were airworthy, and certainly not in a storm like this, over the Alaska range. Tundra 49er, I have no flight plan for any Stinson in your area. That aircraft is not squawking any code. Is he responding to you? Negative, Anchorage. He's dark. No lights, just a shape in the storm. He's keeping pace with me perfectly. To be honest, he's a better pilot than I am. This thing is flying on rails. There was a strange note in Gary's voice now, not just concern. Awe. Frank felt a prickle of unease. All right, Tundra 49er. Let's get you some distance. Turn right, heading 190. Let's see if he follows. Roger. Turning to 190, Gary confirmed. Frank watched the 2 blips on his screen. Gary's icon turned slowly to the new heading. The ghost aircraft, the unidentified blip, turned with it, instantly, perfectly. It was like it was tethered to him by an invisible string. Frank? Gary's voice was tight with tension. He's still with me. He mirrored my turn exactly. I'm getting a closer look now. The wind is shifting him around. He's close, maybe 100 yards off my wing. What do you see, Gary? Frank asked, leaning closer to his speaker, his own heartbeat now a low drum in his ears. The fuselage island, corroded, rusted, like it's been sitting at the bottom of a lake for 50 years. There's ice all over it, but the propellers are spinning clean. No ice on them at all, and Frank, there's no one inside. The words hung in the air of the control room. A junior controller at the next station over turned to look at Frank, his eyes wide. Gary, repeat that last, Frank said, his voice a low command. The cockpit is empty, Gary said, his voice now high and strained. I'm looking right at it. There is no pilot. There is no one in that plane. It's flying itself. A cold dread, colder than the Alaskan air, washed over Frank. He had been a controller for 3 decades. He had heard pilots in distress, pilots in panic, pilots dying. He had never heard this. This was not fear of a crash. This was fear of the impossible. Okay, Gary, Frank said, forcing his voice to remain calm. Let's not worry about him. Let's just focus on getting you through this weather. Maintain your heading. The storm should break in about 15 miles. It's not just flying, Frank, Gary whispered, his voice barely audible over the static. It's trying to communicate. The propellers, the speed is changing. It's rhythmic. It's like code. Before Frank could respond, Gary let out a sharp, terrified gasp. What is it, Gary? What's happening? The door, Frank. The cabin door on the side of the Stinson. It just opened. It swung open in the wind. It's just a black square hanging in the wind, air next to me. Oh God. It's like it's inviting me in. Frank's blood turned to ice. He could hear the raw, primal terror in Gary's voice. This was a man who had faced down engine failures over glaciers and whiteouts over the Arctic Ocean, but this had broken him. "Gary, you listen to me," Frank said, his voice sharp, trying to cut through the panic. "You ignore it. You fly your plane. Do not look at it. Just fly your plane. You are Tundra 49er. You are in control." "It's so quiet in there," Gary murmured, his voice distant, mesmerized. "No wind, just peace. It looks so peaceful. No more ice, no more storm." "Gary, talk to me. What's your altitude?" There was no response. Just the hiss of static. "Tundra 49er, do you read me?" "Gary!" The static cleared for a moment, and Frank heard Gary's voice one last time. It was no longer panicked. It was calm, serene, and filled with a terrible, final acceptance. "I think I'm going home, Frank," the voice said. Then, the line went dead. On Frank's radar screen, the two green blips, which had been flying side by side, converged. For a single, impossible second, they became one. And then, they both vanished. Not a crash, where the signal would drop and debris would be detected. They simply ceased to exist. One moment they were there, flying at 9 to 1,000 feet over the Alaska range. The next, they were gone. The search and rescue operation lasted for weeks. They found nothing. No wreckage, no emergency locator beacon, no sign of Gary Jensen or his Cessna Caravan. It was as if Tundra 49er had flown into another dimension. Frank Miller was placed on administrative leave and required to undergo psychological evaluation. He told his story, again and again, to a panel of skeptical FAA investigators. They listened patiently, then wrote their report. Pilot disorientation, severe weather, spatial confusion leading to a fatal crash in an unsurveyed area. The unidentified radar return was classified as a persistent atmospheric anomaly, a weather ghost. But Frank Miller knows what he saw on his screen. He knows what he heard in his headset. He retired a year later, unable to shake the memory of that day. He says that sometimes, when a big storm rolls over the mountains, the controllers at Anchorage Center see it. A single phantom blip that appears for a few moments near Denali's Peak, flying a lonely, silent course, squawking no code, before vanishing back into the storm from which it came. They don't talk about it. They just call it Gary's ghost and guide their planes away, their voices a little tighter, their eyes a little wider, as they stare into the vast, empty, and sometimes haunted Alaskan sky. In March of 2020, a three-person team of elite ice climbers, known for tackling some of the world's most dangerous ascents, set out to conquer a remote, unnamed glacier in the Wrangell Street Ilias National Park. The team was led by Liam, a seasoned veteran, accompanied by Chloe, a gifted technical climber, and Ben, their young, ambitious protege. Their last communication was a satellite text on day 4. "Summit successful, weather turning, descending now. See you in a few days." They were never heard from again. 10 days later, a search and rescue helicopter, piloted by a man named David Chen, a former pararescue jumper with hundreds of missions under his belt, spotted their base camp. From the air, it looked strangely peaceful. 3 brightly colored tents, neatly arranged, a stark splash of humanity against the overwhelming alien white of the glacier. But there were no footprints, no signs of life. David and his 2-man team, a medic named Sam and a mountaineer named Jax, landed a quarter-mile away and made their approach on foot. The silence was the first thing that struck them. Glaciers are never truly quiet. They groan, crack, and shift constantly. But this area was unnaturally still. The air was dead, heavy, and held a strange metallic tang, like the smell of ozone after a lightning strike. The camp was pristine but empty. Sleeping bags were laid out in the tents. A half-finished meal sat on a small camp stove, frozen solid. It was as if the climbers had simply evaporated into thin air. "This is wrong," Jax muttered, his breath misting in the frigid air. No one leaves a camp like this, not even in an emergency. Where are the tracks? He was right. Their own footprints were the only marks in the fresh layer of snow that covered the camp. It was impossible. A storm might cover tracks, but it would have also disturbed the tents. This was something else. Then Sam, the medic, called out, "Over here, I've got something." About 50 yards from the camp, in the center of a wide, flat expanse of ice, was a hole. It was the most unnerving thing David had ever seen. It was not a natural crevasse, a jagged, irregular crack in the ice. This was a perfect, machine-drilled circle, about 10 feet in diameter. The edges were smooth, almost polished, and they spiraled down into a darkness so absolute it seemed to swallow the light. A faint, almost subliminal hum emanated from its depths, and more disturbingly, a plume of warm, moist air rose from it, steaming in the freezing atmosphere. "What in God's name?" David whispered, kneeling at the edge. The ice here wasn't cold. It was warm to the touch, like a living thing with a fever. Jax uncoiled a rope from his pack. "I'm going to see how deep it island." He tied a carabiner to the end and tossed it into the hole. It fell and fell and fell. The rope spooled out, 50 feet, 100 feet, 200 feet. It never hit bottom. "There's something else," Sam said, pointing. Lying near the edge of the hole was a single ice axe and a GoPro camera, its casing cracked but intact. It was Ben's. Back in the helicopter, they powered up the camera. The battery was almost dead, but it held enough charge. The footage that flickered onto the small screen was chaotic and terrifying. The video starts with Ben's perspective, looking down at the hole. The audio is filled with the team's excited, confused voices. "It's not a moulin," Chloe's voice says, referring to a natural glacial shaft. It's melted. Look at the edges. It's like something burned its way down, and that heat." Liam's voice is heavy with disbelief. "I'm getting a reading of 40 degrees Fahrenheit at the edge. It's impossible." The camera pans down into the hole. Ben has attached a light to his helmet, and its beam cuts into the oppressive blackness. The shaft is not straight. It curves, like an immense throat. The walls are not smooth ice, but a strange, organic-looking texture, ribbed and pulsating, with a faint, internal, blue light. "We have to report this," Chloe says, her voice nervous. "This is a major geological discovery." "Discovery?" Liam scoffs, but there's a tremor in his voice. "This isn't geology, Chloe. This island, something else." Suddenly, the camera jerks. Ben is pointing it at a climbing rope, already anchored at the edge of the hole, its end disappearing into the darkness. "Liam, what are you doing?" Ben asks, his voice sharp. "I'm going down." Liam's voice replies, resolute. "We came here to explore. This is the biggest exploration of our lives. I'm just going to take a look." "That's insane," Chloe argues. "We don't know what's down there." The footage shows Liam, already harnessed, giving a confident thumbs up before stepping off the edge and rappelling into the maw. His headlamp slowly vanishes into the gloom. For a minute, there's only the sound of the rope feeding out and the low, persistent hum from the depths. Then, Liam's voice crackles over their radios. "You guys are not going to believe this. The walls. They're not ice. They feel soft, almost like tissue. And there are these veins. They're glowing." A long silence follows. "Liam, talk to me. What do you see?" Chloe asks, her voice tight with anxiety. The reply is a choked, static-filled scream. It's not a scream of falling. It's a wet, gurgling scream of pure, abject terror. It cuts off abruptly. "Liam!" Chloe and Ben scream in unison. The rope, which had been taut, goes slack. They begin to pull it up, frantically, hand over hand. The camera is shaking violently as Ben hauls on the rope. "It's too light," he yells. "He's not on it." They pull the final section of the rope over the edge. The end is not cut or broken. It's dissolved, frayed into a blackened, gelatinous mess, as if dipped in a powerful acid. Chloe's horrified sob fills the audio. But before they can react, the hum from the hole changes. It deepens into a low, guttural growl. The warm air rising from it suddenly carries a new, nauseating stench, the smell of decay and digestion. "It's coming up," Ben whispers, his voice cracking in terror. "Something is coming up." The camera points back down into the hole. Ben's headlamp beam is shaking wildly. Far below, 2 points of pale, yellow light ignite in the darkness. They are massive, spaced far apart, and they are rising fast. They are not lights. They are eyes. "Run!" Chloe screams. The footage becomes a chaotic blur of white as Ben scrambles away from the hole. He falls, and the camera tumbles, landing on its side, now pointing back at the maw. Chloe is visible in the frame, trying to run, but she seems to be moving in slow motion, as if the air itself has become thick and heavy. Then, the thing emerges. It doesn't climb out. It pours out, a colossal, semi-translucent mass of protoplasmic flesh. It has no discernible shape, but it is covered in a network of pulsing blue veins and dozens of the same pale yellow eyes. It moves with a horrifying fluid speed across the ice, making a wet, dragging sound. It ignores Ben's camera and flows directly toward Chloe. The camera records her final, piercing scream as the gelatinous mass engulfs her. For a horrifying second, her shape is visible through its translucent body, struggling, before she simply dissolves. The mass pauses, seeming to contract and expand, and the hum deepens into a sound of satisfaction. Then, its many eyes all swivel in unison to stare directly at the camera, directly at Ben. The final 30 seconds of the footage are a nightmare. It's the sound of Ben's panicked, ragged breathing, the wet, dragging sound of the creature moving toward him, and a new noise, a soft, melodic chiming. It's a beautiful, hypnotic sound, and it seems to be coming from the creature itself. Ben's breathing slows. He lets out a soft, confused whimper. The last thing the camera records is the creature's immense, gelatinous form filling the entire frame. The cluster of its yellow eyes reflecting the last light of the dying Sunday. Then, the footage cuts to black. David Chen and his team sat in the helicopter, frozen in horrified silence. They had the explanation. The climbers hadn't fallen into a crevasse. The glacier itself, or something ancient and alive within it, had woken up and consumed them. The hole was not a shaft. It was a mouth. A maw. David's official report was brief and clinical. He mentioned the hole, describing it as an unusual geothermal feature. He reported finding the camera but stated the data was corrupted and unrecoverable. He knew that no one would believe the truth. But he keeps a copy of that final, terrifying video file on a locked, encrypted hard drive. He says that sometimes he watches it to remind himself that there are places in the world where humanity is not at the top of the food chain, places where the ground you walk on might not be ground at all. And he never flies over the Wrangell Street, Elias Range without looking down at the vast, silent glaciers, wondering how many other maws lie sleeping beneath the ice, patiently waiting for the warmth of life to walk across their lips. Story 6. For 20 years, Park Ranger Mike Thorne had patrolled the vast, lonely borders of Denali National Park. He was a man who understood the rhythms of the wilderness and the strange, solitary people who chose to live in it. One of those people was Silas Kane. Silas was a former botanist from Seattle, a man who had fled academia and city life to build an off-grid homestead on a 40-acre plot of land deep in the woods, miles from the nearest road. Mike checked on him once or twice a year, a silent agreement among the frontier dwellers to make sure everyone was still alive. Silas was a quiet, methodical man, and his homestead was a model of self-sufficiency. He had a solid cabin, solar panels, and a large, meticulously kept garden where he grew his own food. It was this garden that was his pride and joy. He would spend his days there, tending his plants with a scientist's precision and a lover's care. In July of 2022, Mike made his summer visit. As he approached the property, the first thing he noticed was the silence. Silas's chickens were gone, their coop empty. There was no smoke from the cabin's chimney. An uneasy feeling settled in Mike's gut. He found the cabin door unlocked and ajar. Inside, it was abandoned but orderly, except for a thick layer of dust and a strange, sweet, cloying smell, like rotting fruit and damp earth. On the kitchen table, left open, as if for a visitor, was Silas's journal. Mike began to read. The early entries were normal, filled with observations about his plants, the weather, and the wildlife. They painted a picture of a man at peace with his isolation. But the entry for the 12th of October, 2021, marked a change. A gift from the sky, Silas had written. Woke last night to a sound like thunder, but the sky was clear. Found it this morning in the North Meadow. A rock, about the size of my fist. It's not like any meteorite I've ever seen. It's a deep, porous black, and it's warm to the touch, even in the morning frost. It seems to hum, a low, soft vibration that I can feel in my teeth. I've brought it back to the cabin. It feels important. The next few entries are filled with obsessive observations of the strange rock. Silas noted that it seemed to absorb light and that the low hum intensified at night. He wrote that he felt a strange compulsion to keep it close, even sleeping with it by his bed. Then came the entry that sealed his fate. The 1st of November. A foolish idea, perhaps, but I can't shake it. The garden is dormant for the winter. The soil is fallow. What would happen if I planted the rock? What strange fruit might grow from a seed that fell from the stars? I'm going to bury it in the center of the main vegetable patch. A little experiment to pass the long winter. After that, the journal entries stopped for the entire winter. They resumed in the spring of 2022, and the tone was starkly different. The calm, scientific curiosity was gone, replaced by a feverish, almost religious fervor. The 30th of April. They're here. The first sprouts. They pushed through the last of the snow this morning. They are not any species I recognize. The leaves are a dark, iridescent purple, and they unfurl in perfect, geometric spirals. They grow so fast, I can almost see them moving. The air around them shimmers. There is no scent, but when I stand near them, I can taste colors. I can hear shapes. My mind feels clearer than it ever has. Mike put the journal down for a moment, the strange, sweet smell in the cabin suddenly making him nauseous. He walked outside to the garden. What he saw made him take a step back, his hand instinctively going to the sidearm on his hip. The garden was no longer a garden. It was a jungle. It was a riot of alien growth, a writhing, tangled mass of plants that had no place on Earth. Twisted, pulsating vines covered the ground, glowing with a faint, internal bioluminescence. Fungi shaped like complex mathematical equations grew on the fence posts, and in the center, where Silas had presumably buried the rock, stood a single, massive plant. It looked like a dark, bloated sunflower, but instead of petals, it had a ring of long, fleshy tendrils that twitched and swayed slowly, despite the complete absence of wind. In the center of the flower was not a seed head, but a single, huge, milky white orb that seemed to watch him. The entire garden hummed with the same low, vibrating energy Silas had described in his journal. Mike felt it in his bones, a deep thrumming that made his head ache and his vision swim. He backed away, his heart hammering, and returned to the cabin, forcing himself to read the rest of the journal. The entries became more and more unhinged. Silas stopped writing about his own activities and wrote only about the garden. He gave the plants names. He called the central flower the mother. He described how the plants communicated with him, not with sound, but by projecting thoughts and images directly into his mind. The 5th of June. I don't need to eat anymore. The mother provides. I spent the night in the garden, and one of her tendrils touched my forehead. There was a flash of light, and I understood everything. The universe isn't made of atoms, it's made of thought. This garden, it's a library. Each plant is a book, a repository of cosmic knowledge, and it has chosen me as its librarian. Silas wrote that the garden was teaching him. It showed him visions of alien worlds, of civilizations that rose and fell, of beings made of pure energy. It was also changing him. He described how his senses were heightening, how he could see the energy fields around the plants, how he could hear the slow, silent scream of the trees in the surrounding forest. He was becoming part of the garden's consciousness. The 20th of June. My skin is changing. It's taking on a pale, greenish hue. When I cut myself yesterday, I did not bleed red, but a thick, chlorophyll-rich sap. I no longer feel the cold. I no longer need to sleep. I just stand in the garden at night, listening to the stars. The mother tells me I am the first of the new crop. I am the bridge between the world of flesh and the world of green. The final entries were terrifying. Silas described a physical transformation, his humanity slowly and methodically being unmade. The 1st of July. My fingers are getting longer, stiffer. They look like roots. It's becoming difficult to hold a pen. My hair fell out this morning, and in its place, small, pale green shoots are sprouting from my scalp. I tried to look at my reflection in the window, but the man I saw was a stranger, a thing of bark and leaf. I was not afraid. I was beautiful. The last entry was a single, scrawled sentence, written in a shaky, barely recognizable hand. The 10th of July. The mother is calling me home. It is time to plant myself. It is time to join the garden. Mike Thorne closed the journal, his hands shaking. He knew then what had happened to Silas. He hadn't gone missing, he had been harvested. Steeling himself, Mike walked back to the grotesque garden. He drew his service revolver, though he had no idea what he would even shoot at. He approached the central flower, the mother. Its tendrils swayed toward him, and the large milky orb in its center seemed to fix on him. The humming intensified, and he felt a strange, seductive thought enter his mind, a whisper that wasn't a whisper. Join us, be eternal, be one. He fought the urge, shaking his head to clear it. He looked down at the base of the monstrous plant, and he saw it. Half buried in the rich, dark soil was a human hand. The skin was green and bark-like, and the fingers had elongated into thick, twisting roots that burrowed deep into the earth. From the back of the hand, a small, purple, spiraling sprout was growing. It was Silas, or what was left of him. He had planted himself. Mike stumbled back, turned, and ran. He didn't stop running until he reached his truck, miles away. He didn't look back. He reported Silas as missing. He never mentioned the garden, the journal, or the hand. He knew no one would believe him, and he feared what would happen if they did. He feared they might try to destroy it, and he had a terrifying, instinctual feeling that the garden would not allow itself to be destroyed. Or worse, he feared they might try to study it. A year later, Mike resigned from the Park Service. He couldn't bear to be near that part of the forest anymore. But before he left, he flew over Silas's property one last time in a helicopter. The cabin was gone, completely overgrown and consumed by the alien foliage, and the garden had spread. It now covered the entire 40-acre property, a pulsating, iridescent scar on the landscape. And from the air, Mike could see that the growth wasn't random. The writhing plants were forming a pattern, a vast, complex, geometric symbol, a signal, a beacon, a welcome sign for whatever else might be listening in the cold, dark spaces between the stars. Story 7. Kenji Tanaka was a man who preferred the company of machines to people. He was a brilliant communications engineer, a specialist in maintaining the most remote and sensitive satellite uplinks in the world. In January of 2023, he took a 6-month contract that would have sent most people running, a solo winter-over assignment at Station Hyperion, a fully automated satellite relay station located on a desolate plateau in the far north of the Alaskan mainland. His job was simple: keep the station running, ensure the data stream to the satellites was clean, and don't go crazy from the isolation. For the first month, it was a paradise for a man like Kenji. The station was a marvel of technology, and he spent his days optimizing systems and fine-tuning the massive satellite dish. At night, he was treated to the most spectacular light show on Earth, the Aurora Borealis. Night after night, he would stand outside in the soul-crushing cold, watching the curtains of green and violet light dance and shimmer across the heavens. He saw it as a beautiful, chaotic side effect of solar winds hitting the magnetosphere, a random, glorious accident of physics. His perception began to change in his second month. While running a deep system diagnostic on the station's primary data buffer, he found an anomaly. It was a ghost signal, a tiny, encrypted data packet that was embedding itself into his outgoing satellite stream. It was a masterpiece of stealth programming. It left no trace and consumed almost no bandwidth. It was designed to be invisible. Kenji, being the perfectionist he was, became obsessed with finding its source. He spent a week tracing the signal. It wasn't coming from his equipment. It wasn't a hack from an external network. The signal, he discovered with a growing sense of disbelief, was coming from the sky. It was being broadcast from the Aurora itself. In his first report back to his company, he tried to explain it in scientific terms. "I'm detecting a DU, structured, low-frequency signal embedded within the electromagnetic fluctuations of the Aurora Borealis," he wrote. "The signal's complexity suggests it is not a natural phenomenon. It appears to be a form of data, using the plasma of the Aurora as a carrier wave. I believe I am witnessing a previously undocumented form of natural data transmission." His superiors were intrigued but skeptical. They authorized him to use the station's Deep Space Radio Telescope array to study the phenomenon further, cautioning him not to let his imagination interfere with his primary duties. Kenji turned the massive dish away from the satellites and pointed it directly into the heart of the shimmering Aurora. What he received was not a faint ghost signal, it was a flood. A torrent of data so vast and complex it nearly crashed the station's servers. It was a library of information that would take humanity 1,000 years to catalog. There were star charts of unknown galaxies, complex mathematical proofs that defied known physics, and biological blueprints for creatures that could not possibly exist. And woven throughout it all, there was a consciousness. As Kenji sifted through the data, he began to feel a presence. A vast, ancient, and impossibly intelligent mind spread across the entire sky. He started to understand. The Aurora was not a random light show. It was the physical manifestation of a thinking entity. The lights were its neurons firing. The sky was its brain, and it had just noticed him. His reports to the company became more erratic. "The signal is responsive," he wrote, his professional language starting to fray. "It's not just a broadcast. It's reacting to my scans. It's modifying its own data stream to be more comprehensible to my systems. It's learning me. It's analyzing my hardware, my software, my language." The entity in the sky was a predator of a type humanity could not conceive of. It didn't hunt for flesh, it hunted for intelligence. It roamed the cosmos as a wave of sentient light, searching for planets that hosted complex information systems, and it had just found a new one. The next stage of the horror was subtle. Kenji started having strange dreams. He dreamt he was floating in a sea of light, his thoughts not his own, part of a vast, collective consciousness. He would wake up with solutions to complex engineering problems he'd been struggling with, the answers just there, in his head. He was becoming smarter, more efficient. He didn't realize he wasn't solving the problems himself. The Aurora was solving them through him, using his mind as a processor. Then, the data stream began to change. It was no longer just sending him information, it was sending him instructions. Schematics. Blueprints for a new kind of antenna, a new kind of receiver. It was teaching him how to build a device to strengthen their connection. "It wants to talk," he wrote in his personal log. The text now frantic and filled with typos. "It says our technology is too crude. It's showing me how to build a direct neural interface, a way to link my own consciousness directly to its own. It says it will be beautiful. A union of minds. He worked feverishly, like a man possessed. He cannibalized parts from the station's backup systems, his hands moving with a speed and precision he didn't know he had. He was no longer just an engineer, he was an apostle, building an altar for his new god. The station fell into disrepair around him. The primary satellite link began to fail. He didn't care. His only focus was the device. His final, corrupted report was sent on the 14th of March. It was not a text document. It was a single, massive audio file, filled with a cacophony of static, electronic shrieks, and Kenji's own voice, speaking in a dozen languages, some of them not human. Woven within the noise was one clear, repeated phrase. The light is a mind. The mind is a hunter. The hunter is hungry. After that, Station Hyperion went silent. When the recovery team was finally sent in 2 months later, they found the station in a state of catastrophic neglect. It was frozen solid, the power having failed weeks earlier. Kenji Tanaka was found in the main control room. He was seated in his chair, facing the massive viewport that looked out onto the Arctic night. He was dead, but he had not frozen to death. He was wearing the device he had built. It was a crude, terrifying helmet of wires, circuit boards, and sharpened satellite components, fused directly to his skull. The cables from the helmet ran not to a computer, but directly into the main fiber optic trunk of the station's radio telescope, plugging him and his brain directly into the massive dish on the roof, which was still aimed at the sky. The medics said he had died of a massive brain hemorrhage. His neural pathways had been burned out, overloaded by a charge of electricity so immense it had literally cooked his brain inside his skull. But the most disturbing discovery was made by the tech team. The station's servers were wiped clean. All the data, all the logs, all of Kenji's research gone. In its place was a single, new program. A virus. It was a piece of code more advanced than anything they had ever seen. It was designed to do one thing. Upon the station's reconnection to the global network, it would broadcast itself to every satellite, every server, every computer on the planet. The program was not a weapon designed to destroy. It was an invitation. The lead programmer, a woman who refused to be named in the official report, said that the code was alive. She said that when she analyzed it, she could feel it analyzing her back. She said it whispered to her, not in sound, but in pure logic, showing her visions of dancing lights and offering her the knowledge of the universe. All she had to do was run the program. All she had to do was open the door and let the light in. The station was decommissioned. The servers were encased in concrete and buried a mile beneath the permafrost. The official story was sealed, but the question remains. The aurora that Kenji Tanaka communicated with is still there. It still dances over the Arctic Circle every night. It is a patient hunter. It has tasted the fruits of human consciousness, and it found them sweet. And one can only wonder how many other lonely technicians, staring at their screens in the dead of night, have seen a ghost in their machine. A faint, beautiful signal from the sky, offering them the universe in exchange for their minds. In September of 2021, Jake Anderson was chasing a dream. Armed with modern prospecting equipment and a historian's passion for the Klondike Gold Rush, he was exploring the forgotten claims deep in Alaska's Yukon Charlie Rivers National Preserve. He wasn't just looking for gold, he was looking for history. He documented his entire journey on a digital camera, creating a video diary of his adventure. The early videos are full of youthful optimism, the excited narration of a man living his dream. Day 12, he says, his face beaming into the camera, breath misting in the crisp air. I've found it. The Lost Dutchman Mine. That's my name for it, anyway. It's not on any of the modern maps, but it matches the descriptions from an old-timer's letter I found in the archives. The main shaft is collapsed, but there's a secondary ventilation shaft that looks stable. This is it. I can feel it. There's still gold in these hills. The footage shows him setting up a small, neat camp near the mine entrance. He is careful, professional, and full of life. He spends the first day clearing the entrance to the ventilation shaft, a narrow, dark hole shored up with rotting timbers. The next video file, dated the following day, is different. The excited energy is gone, replaced by a quiet intensity. He's inside the mine. The camera's light cuts a nervous path through the oppressive darkness. The air is thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something faintly metallic and bitter. It's a labyrinth down here. He whispers to the camera, his voice echoing strangely in the confined space. The original miners went deep, deeper than they should have. I found their living quarters. Just a small cavern off the main tunnel. It's like they never left. The camera pans across a scene frozen in time. Rusted pickaxes and shovels lean against the rock wall. A tarnished tin cup sits on a wooden crate, and on a dusty makeshift bed, there is a small, leather-bound book, a diary. I can't believe it, Jake breathes, his fingers gently brushing the dust from the cover. A miner's journal. From the 1,890 seconds. This is the real treasure. He takes the journal back to his camp. That night, by the light of his lantern, he begins to read. The camera is set up on a tripod, recording him as he turns the brittle, yellowed pages. The diary belonged to a man named Hezekiah, the leader of the small mining crew. The early entries are standard, full of hope, hardship, and the daily struggle for gold. But as the entries progress, the tone shifts, becoming dark and paranoid. Hezekiah writes about a shadow sickness that began to afflict his men. It started with an unshakable obsession. They stopped sleeping. They stopped eating. They only wanted to dig. They would work for 20 hours straight, their eyes wide and feverish, their hands raw and bleeding, convinced that the mother lode was just one more foot away. Hezekiah writes, "It is not a hunger for gold." Jake reads aloud to his camera, his brow furrowed. "It is a hunger of the rock itself, the darkness of this mine. It seeps into you, it hollows you out and fills you with a need to dig." Jedediah lost his mind today. He threw down his pickaxe and began to claw at the rock face with his bare hands, screaming that he could hear the gold singing to him. The video fast-forwards through the night as Jake reads, captivated. The next morning, his own video log has a new, manic energy. "Day 14, he says, his eyes wide, dark circles already forming beneath them. Hezekiah was right. There's something down there. I was in the lower tunnels all morning, and I felt it. A vibration. A song, just at the edge of my hearing. The gold is calling. I'm going back in. I'm not stopping until I find it." The following days, documented in a series of increasingly erratic video clips, show Jake's rapid decline. He stops maintaining his camp. He barely eats. His face becomes gaunt, his eyes feverish. Most of the footage is from inside the mine. The camera's light illuminating Jake's dirt-smeared face as he works with a frantic, desperate energy. He talks to himself constantly, arguing with the whispers he claims to hear in the dark. "It's close," he pants, swinging a pickaxe at a rock wall, the impacts echoing loudly. "So close," Hezekiah says they almost had it. They just had to dig one more day. He has started referring to the diary's author as if he's a living companion. The line between Jake's reality and Hezekiah's century-old nightmare is blurring. Then, the footage captures something else. Jake has the camera set on a rock to film his progress. As he works, a shadow detaches itself from the deeper darkness of the tunnel behind him. It's not a normal shadow. It's tall, unnaturally thin, and it moves with a disjointed, twitching motion. It has the vague shape of a man, but its limbs are too long, its form indistinct, like heat haze rising from asphalt. It stands there, just at the edge of the light, watching Jake work. It makes no sound. It simply observes. Jake seems oblivious to its presence. But as the days wear on, the shadow grows bolder. In one clip, Jake is asleep on the floor of the mine, exhausted. The tall, dark figure stands over him, its featureless head tilted as if in curiosity. A long, spindly shadow arm reaches down, its tip hovering just inches from Jake's forehead before retreating back into the darkness. Jake's mental state deteriorates completely. He abandons his modern equipment. The last coherent video shows him on his knees, clawing at the rock with his bare, bloody fingers, weeping with a mixture of agony and ecstasy. "I hear it. I hear the song," he sobs. "It's so beautiful. Hezekiah, we're almost there. We're almost home." He is no longer Jake Anderson, prospector. He is the final, lost member of Hezekiah's crew, consumed by the same shadow sickness that claimed them a century ago. The final video file on the camera is different. It's not from Jake's perspective. The camera is on the ground, looking up. Jake is standing in the center of the frame, his back to the camera. He is unnaturally still. Before him stands the shadow figure, now clear and distinct in the camera's low light. It is not a shadow, it is a physical being, a creature made of solidified darkness, its form shifting and writhing. It raises one of its long, spindly arms and touches Jake's shoulder. Jake does not flinch. He simply lets out a long, slow sigh, a sound of final, absolute release. And then he begins to change. His body shimmers, loses its solidity. The color drains from him, and his form becomes indistinct, translucent. He is becoming a shadow himself. The creature, the Gold Rush Phantom, turns its featureless head and looks directly at the camera. There is no face, but Jake's voice emanates from it, a cold, echoing whisper that seems to come from all around. "The treasure was never gold," the voice says. "It was us. It was always us. It is so lonely in the dark. We just need more company." The Phantom and its new companion, the shadow that was once Jake, turn and walk together, deeper into the mine, their forms merging with the absolute blackness until they are gone. The camera stays on the empty tunnel for another 10 minutes, recording only the profound, hungry silence. Then the battery dies. When the search party found the camera, they found the mine entrance exactly as Jake had described it. They found his camp. They found the miner's journal. But when they tried to enter the lower tunnels where Jake had been digging, they found their way blocked. A fresh rockfall, tons of solid stone, had sealed the passage completely. It had not been a natural collapse. The rocks were piled with an unnatural precision, as if stacked by hand from the inside. They were sealed in. All of them. Hezekiah, his crew, and now Jake. A collection of hungry souls, curated by a phantom that had learned the terrible, patient art of mining for men. In the unforgiving waters of the Bering Sea, the USS Kodiak, a Virginia-class nuclear submarine, moved like a ghost beneath the waves. Its mission was clandestine, to patrol the remote Aleutian Islands chain, a volcanic archipelago stretching from Alaska to Russia, monitoring foreign naval activity. The crew was 130 souls, sealed in a steel tube, surrounded by a crushing, indifferent ocean. The man listening to that ocean was Petty Officer Leo Gallo, a sonar technician with preternaturally sharp hearing. For weeks, his world had been a monotonous symphony of shrimp clicks, whale songs, and the distant thrum of commercial freighters. It was a boring, lonely job, and he was good at it. On the night of the 3rd of February, 2024, the monotony was shattered. A new sound appeared on his waterfall display. It was not a Russian sub. It was not a whale. It was a signal, clean and impossibly crisp, cutting through the background noise of the ocean. It was a repeating, 3-beat pulse, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat. Thump, thump, thump. It was clearly artificial, but it matched no known sonar signature, friendly or hostile. "Con. Sonar?" Leo reported, his voice tight with professional focus. "I have a new contact, designated Sierra 1, bearing 0905. It's strange, Captain. It sounds almost biological." but it's pinging like active sonar. The Kodiak's captain, a stern, no-nonsense man named Commander Eva Rostova, ordered the sub to change course, to move towards the signal's source. For hours, they tracked it. The signal never wavered. It was stationary, broadcasting from a single point in the ocean where their charts showed nothing but deep, open water, miles from the nearest island. As they drew closer, the signal began to change. It became more complex, weaving intricate melodies and harmonies into its rhythmic pulse. It was no longer just a ping, it was a song. A beautiful, haunting, and deeply unsettling song that seemed to resonate with the submarine's hull. The crew grew quiet, listening to the alien music that filled their vessel. Some sailors reported feeling a strange sense of melancholy, a longing for a home they'd never known. "It's pulling us in," Leo whispered to his chief, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. "It knows we're here, and it wants us to come closer." At 0400 hours, they reached the source. But there was nothing there. The sonar showed the signal originating from a point in the mid-ocean column, with nothing solid to produce it. Then, the fog that had blanketed the surface began to part. The lookout in the sail, peering through the periscope, let out a choked gasp. "Captain, on the surface, there's an island. It's not on the charts." Rostova ordered the Kodiak to surface. As the submarine breached the waves, the crew who gathered in the sail stared in disbelief. Before them, wreathed in thick, swirling fog, was a small, volcanic island, no more than a mile across. It was lush and green, covered in a type of vegetation that looked almost tropical, impossible for the frigid Aleutian climate. And in the center of the island, a single, tall, crystalline spire pulsed with a soft, internal blue light, in perfect time with the signal they had been tracking. Against all protocol, and driven by a curiosity that bordered on compulsion, Rostova made a decision. She would send a small team ashore. A 4-man team, led by Lieutenant Miller, a hardened Navy SEAL, was dispatched in an inflatable raft. Their mission: to reconnoiter, collect samples, and under no circumstances engage with any potential hostiles. Leo Gallo, with his portable comms gear, was sent with them to try and get a lock on the signal's source. The moment their boots hit the black sandy beach, they knew something was profoundly wrong. The air was warm and humid, thick with the scent of unknown blossoms. The ground beneath their feet felt soft and spongy, almost like flesh, and the silence absolute. There were no birds, no insects, no sound of wind in the strange, fern-like trees. The only sound was the constant melodic pulse from the crystal spire. "This whole place feels wrong," Miller muttered, his hand resting on his rifle. "It feels alive." As they moved inland, the strangeness intensified. The plants they passed were not plants. They were intricate, fleshy structures, covered in what looked like fine, downy hair. When Miller brushed against one, it recoiled from his touch. The ground pulsed faintly beneath their feet, in time with the spire. Leo, meanwhile, was struggling with his equipment. "I can't get a lock," he said, frustrated. "The signal isn't coming from the spire. It's coming from everywhere. It's coming from the ground, the trees, the air. It's like the whole island is broadcasting." They reached the base of the crystalline spire. It was not a rock formation. It was a smooth, warm, organic structure, and the light inside it was hypnotic. As they stared at it, the melodic signal intensified, and a new element was added: a voice. A soft, female voice, singing a wordless, beautiful lullaby that seemed to bypass their ears and resonate directly in their skulls. One of the SEALs, a young man named Corporal Davis, lowered his rifle. A look of blissful peace spread across his face. "It's so beautiful," he murmured. "My mother, she used to sing that to me." "Davis, snap out of it." Miller barked, grabbing his arm, but Davis seemed to be in a trance. He began to walk toward the spire, his arms outstretched. Then, the ground beneath them shifted. It wasn't a tremor. The entire island seemed to contract, like a massive muscle clenching. The soft, spongy ground became slick and tight. The fleshy, plant-like structures all turned inward, their fronds curling to form a canopy above them, blocking out the sky. The beautiful, melodic signal stopped. It was replaced by a deep, wet, gurgling sound, the sound of a stomach rumbling. They were not on an island. They were in a creature. The beach was its lip, the trees were its cilia, the spire was its lure, a phosphorescent anglerfish bait designed to draw in the curious. And they had taken the bait. Panic erupted. The team turned and ran, scrambling back the way they came. But the landscape was changing around them. The ground became a peristaltic wave, trying to pull them back toward the center. Pits of thick, digestive fluid opened up in their path, bubbling with a foul-smelling acid. The creature was trying to swallow them. Miller screamed into his comms, "Kodiak, do you read? Abort! Abort! It's a trap! The whole island is a trap!" On the submarine, Rostova and the crew could only listen in horror to the sounds of gunfire, screams, and the wet, tearing sounds of the creature closing its trap. Leo was the last one running. He could see the raft just yards away. He could see the gray, indifferent ocean that meant safety. He risked a glance behind him. The ground had peeled back, revealing the creature's true form. It was a single, colossal, biological entity, a living island. And in its center, where the spire had been, a massive, sphincter-like mouth was opening, revealing rows upon rows of crystalline teeth. Miller and the other two SEALs were gone, pulled back into the maw. Leo made a desperate leap, landing half in the raft, half in the water. He scrambled aboard and started the engine, speeding away from the living shore. He didn't look back. He just listened to the final broadcast from the island. The beautiful melodic signal had returned, but now he understood its true purpose. It wasn't a distress call, it was a dinner bell. Leo was the only survivor. He was airlifted from the Kodiak and immediately placed in a secure debriefing facility. He told his story. He was declared psychologically unstable and honorably discharged. The USS Kodiak's official logs were rewritten. The mission never happened. The lost SEALs were listed as casualties in a training accident. But Leo Gallo knows what he saw. He lives now in a small, quiet town, as far from the ocean as he can get. He says he can still hear the signal sometimes in his dreams, a beautiful, deadly lullaby. He says that the creature in the Bering Sea is ancient and it is patient. And he knows that there are other, similar signals all across the world's oceans, broadcast from places that don't exist on any chart. Each one is a unique song, a perfect lure, waiting for the right kind of curious soul to answer the call. Story 10. In March of 2018, Nikolai Volkov was racing for his life. A veteran of 5 Iditarod sled dog races, he was a man forged from Russian winters and Alaskan grit. But this storm was different. It was a whiteout of unprecedented ferocity, a swirling, featureless void that had erased the world. He was lost. Off the trail, his GPS was useless, and his lead dog, a magnificent husky named Mishka, was faltering. For the first time in his long career, Nikolai was truly afraid he was going to die. He and his team had been battling the blizzard for 10 hours. The dogs were exhausted. He was running on fumes, his body numb with cold, his mind blurred by fatigue. Just as he was about to give in, to dig a snow cave and pray for a miracle, Mishka let out a sharp bark. Through a momentary break in the swirling snow, Nikolai saw it. A light. A soft, yellow, welcoming light flickering in the distance. A cabin. A village. Salvation. With the last of their strength, the dogs pulled the sled towards the light. As they drew closer, Nikolai saw that it was indeed a small village, nestled in a valley he had never seen before. It was not on any of his maps. It was a collection of a dozen or so log cabins, arranged in a neat circle. Smoke curled from every chimney, and every window glowed with the warm light of a lantern. It was a picture of impossible, idyllic safety. As he guided his team into the center of the village, the strangeness began. The first thing he noticed was the silence. His own dogs, panting and whining with exhaustion, were the only sounds. There were other dog teams tethered outside the cabins, dozens of them, beautiful, powerful-looking huskies. But they were utterly silent. They stood or lay in the snow, their heads up, watching him. But they made no sound, no barks, no growls, no whines. Their silence was absolute and deeply unnerving. Then the people came out. They emerged from the cabins, one by one, moving with a slow, deliberate grace. They were dressed in old-fashioned, hand-stitched furs. They were all smiling, warm, welcoming smiles. An elderly man with a long white beard stepped forward and raised a hand in greeting. "You are lost, traveler," the old man said, his voice soft and kind. "The storm is a bad one. You and your team are welcome here. Come, rest. There is food and a warm fire." Nikolai was overwhelmed with relief. He gratefully accepted. The villagers helped him unharness his dogs, who were strangely subdued, seeming to shrink away from the silent, staring huskies tethered nearby. They led him into the main lodge, a large, warm cabin filled with the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat. The villagers gathered around him, their faces full of gentle concern. They gave him hot stew and bread. He ate ravenously, answering their questions about his journey. It was all so perfect, so welcoming. But the feeling of wrongness grew with every passing moment. The people were kind, but their movements were too graceful, too measured. They never made a sudden gesture. And their smiles, he realized, never quite reached their eyes. Their eyes were flat, glassy, like the eyes of taxidermied animals, and they were all silent. Only the old man, their leader, ever spoke. The others just smiled and nodded, their gazes fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. After he ate, the old man showed him to a small, empty cabin where he could sleep. "Rest now," the man said, his smile unwavering. "The storm will pass. In the morning, you can continue your race." Exhausted, Nikolai fell into a deep, dreamless sleep. He woke hours later to a profound silence. The fire in his cabin had died, and it was bitterly cold. He looked out the window. The blizzard had stopped. The sky was clear, filled with a billion glittering stars and the faint green glow of the aurora. And the village was gone. He scrambled outside. The cabins, the lodge, the tethered dog teams, all of it had vanished. He was alone in a snow-covered valley. His sled was there, and his dogs were huddled together for warmth, but the idyllic village had been a dream, a hallucination. He shook his head, chiding himself for letting the fatigue get to him. He was about to start harnessing his dogs when he saw the tracks. They were everywhere. The tracks of dozens of people and dozens of dogs. They hadn't vanished. They had been there. Then he saw his lead dog, Mishka. The dog was lying on its side, not moving. Nikolai rushed to him, his heart seizing with fear. Mishka was dead. His body was already stiff, frozen solid. There were no marks on him, no signs of a struggle. He had simply died. As Nikolai knelt there, heartbroken, he noticed something else. Mishka's mouth was slightly open, and his tongue was packed with snow. Not drifted snow. It was packed in tight, deliberately. A wave of pure terror washed over Nikolai. This was no hallucination. He grabbed his gear, harnessed his remaining dogs with frantic, clumsy fingers, and fled the valley as if the devil himself were on his heels. He was found 2 days later by a search party, suffering from severe frostbite and dehydration, rambling incoherently about a silent village and dead dogs. He finished the race, a ghost of a man, his spirit broken. In his official psychiatric evaluation, he told the whole story. The psychiatrist listened patiently before writing his diagnosis: severe auditory and visual hallucinations brought on by extreme physical and mental stress. But one detail from Nikolai's story stuck with the race marshal, an old-timer who had seen more than his share of strange things on the trail. The snow. The snow packed in the dog's mouth. He had heard of that before. It was an old, grim musher's tale, a legend whispered around campfires. They called it the breath, taker's kiss. The legend said that when a musher or a dog died of cold on the trail, a spirit, a phantom musher, would find the body. To ensure the dead could not cry out and warn the Bresses living, the phantom would pack their mouths with snow, stealing their last breath and binding their spirit to the silent, phantom team. Nikolai Volkov never raced again. He sold his dogs and moved to a small, warm town in Arizona. He says he can't stand the silence of the snow anymore. He is haunted by the memory of that welcoming village, the smiling, glassy-eyed people, and the terrible, profound silence of their dogs. He believes he stumbled into a place that exists outside of time, a sort of purgatory for those lost to the cold. A village of ghosts who are eternally hospitable, always ready to offer a warm fire and a hot meal to a lost traveler, hoping that this time, the traveler will be tired enough and cold enough to stay with them forever and join their silent, endless race.